Welcome back to our news bulletin. In Afghanistan, a week-long violence reduction agreement between the US Taliban and Afghan security forces has taken effect. The US and the Taliban both set the plan as a precondition to signing a peace agreement on February 29th.
Welcoming the development, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani said the army will remain at active defense status during the week. The Afghan National Security Council said the government hopes the peace plan will open the way for a ceasefire and intra-Afghan talks. In a tweet, Taliban spokesman Suhail Shaheen said the agreement will end the country's foreign occupation. The group said both sides will invite senior representatives to take part in the agreement signing ceremony. The Taliban said the signing will be followed by intra-Afghan talks between the country's political parties. Earlier, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the move will reduce the US presence in the country.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has welcomed the announcement of peace deal signing between the Taliban and the US. In a statement, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Islamabad played a constructive role in the US-Taliban dialogue. The Foreign Minister said it was not easy to convince Taliban for negotiations with the US. Qureshi said the whole world, including US, has acknowledged Pakistan's positive role. The Foreign Minister said Washington should be aware of spoilers in this peace initiative. The United Nations says over 100,000 Afghan civilians were killed and wounded in the last 10 years. The report by UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan comes as a week of violence reduction begins today. The report said 3,493 civilians were killed last year, while nearly 7,000 others suffered injuries. It said there is a 21% increase in civilian casualties by the Taliban and an 18% rise in casualties by US and Afghan forces. The UN said violence in the country affected almost every civilian in some way. The international body said it is absolutely imperative for all parties to seize the moment to stop fighting as peace is long overdue. Taking steps against terrorism, Pakistan has successfully eliminated militants, foiled terror attacks and brought back stability. In the last 20 years, the country's military and security forces have tirelessly fought against the menace of terrorism.
Under the anti-terrorism campaign Raddul Fasad, the military has carried out almost 149,000 operations and averted nearly 400 terrorist plans since 2017. Due to forces' efforts, Pakistan's economic hub Karachi's ranking has improved by 91 points in the Crimes Index. To stop cross-border terrorism, Pakistan has fenced 1,450 kilometers of its border with Afghanistan. Pakistan Army has built 343 forts and 161 are under construction along the border. Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa said gains of 2 decades of war on terror shall be consolidated to achieve enduring peace and stability. He said the army is aware and capable of thwarting all threats to security and sovereignty of Pakistan, irrespective of the cost.
In another act of state terrorism, Indian troops have martyred 2 youths in Anantnag district of occupied Kashmir. Police said the civilians were targeted during a cordon and search operation in the Sangam village of the district. Indian forces have martyred 28 Kashmiris over the past 2 months. Meanwhile, Indian forces have arrested 2 Kashmiris under controversial Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. A person booked under the act can be jailed for months without bail. Civilians were arrested for alleged misuse of social media against Indian forces in the valley. The valley is reeling under Indian curfew and communications blackout for the last 202 days. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says India has turned occupied Kashmir into an open prison. In an interview, Khan highlighted increased Indian atrocities in the valley. The Prime Minister said current Indian government follows a Hindutva ideology which is inspired by Nazism. He said due to its extremism, New Delhi has jailed 8 million Kashmiri Muslims since 5th August. The Prime Minister said Kashmir issue is the major impediment to trade cooperation between Pakistan and India. President Donald Trump will raise the issue of religious freedom in India during his visit to the country next week. US officials said religious rights violation in India's new Citizenship Act is on Trump's agenda for his meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The official said religious freedom issue is extremely important to the Trump administration. Meanwhile, United States Commission on International Religious Freedom has criticized the Citizenship Amendment Act. In a report, USCIRF highlights BJP's anti-Muslim sentiment influencing the laws of the land. It said a number of political parties, NGOs and religious groups have moved Indian Supreme Court against the law. Meanwhile, in India, countrywide protests, rallies and sit-ins against controversial Citizenship Act continue despite the government's pressure. The BJP government is facing massive demonstrations against the law for the last 3 months. In a meeting with Supreme Court appointed interlocutors, Shaheen Bagh protesters said police have blocked the road to sit-in site. The protesters said plainclothes policemen are stopping traffic and blaming it on demonstrators, spreading negative propaganda. Meanwhile, similar all-women sit-ins continue in Mumbai, Kolkata and Lucknow. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has urged his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin to stop the Syrian offensive in Idlib. In a phone call, Erdogan said the humanitarian crisis in the war-torn country must end. Erdogan also stressed the need to implement the 2018 Sochi agreement to end the fighting in northwestern Syria. Earlier, the Turkish president asked France and Germany to provide support in ending a humanitarian crisis in Syria. In a phone call with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Erdogan said attacks in Idlib must be stopped. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate ceasefire in Idlib. Nearly 1 million people have fled the violence in the region since December. In Syria, the brutal war in Idlib has forced tens of thousands of people to flee the region. 3 million people are cornered in an ever-shrinking enclave. Half of them are children who are mentally inflicted. Their life is boiled down to bombs and fears. More in this report.
The Syrian regime has launched an offensive in Idlib to take back the final rebel-held bastion. Turkish-backed opposition groups are retaliating to take back locations the government forces have captured. The fight has forced millions of people to flee the war zone. People are not sure where they will go next, as the sounds of jets and bombing are making children sick.
All this displacement is because of the war and the bombing. You hear the sound of the bombing. This isn't our first displacement or our second. There have been many displacements. And every time I say, God, please make things easier, things get worse. And there is more fear. The kids, God Almighty, they aren't running. They hear the sound of the warplanes and they say, God help me. And they hear the sound of shelling and they say, God help me. God rid us of this misfortune.
In some areas of Idlib and Aleppo province, temperatures have dropped down to -7 Celsius, killing several children.
I have a daughter. Her name is Ines and she is 10 years old. She gets scared and can't focus when she hears the sound of a warplane or shelling. She gets really worried. Listen, and there's the bombardment, right in front of your eyes. Look, there's no mercy for the old or the young. God rid us of this misfortune.
Displaced Syrians are sheltering in a camp near the Turkish border. They are cornered in an ever-shrinking enclave.
We suffered a lot on the road because displacement was difficult and there are problems. We want the whole world to see us and learn about our conditions, the children and these camps. It is really a difficult situation. And when you see it, you can learn rather than just hear about it.
The UN has called for a ceasefire to help tackle what it has warned could become the worst humanitarian disaster.
The new coronavirus has claimed another 109 lives in the last 24 hours in China. It now puts the death toll at 2,345. In a significant decline of new cases, the National Health Commission said 397 more infections have been confirmed, bringing the total to 76,000. More in this report.
With the death toll from the new coronavirus outbreak rising globally, fear is spreading at a faster rate. Italy has reported its first COVID-19 fatality, while in the Middle East, 4 people have died in Iran. Iraqi officials have clamped down on travel to and from the country and have begun screening travelers for the virus.
The Najaf International Airport, in cooperation with the Najaf Health Department, has taken all necessary measures by providing detection equipment in arrival halls to check the passengers, and thank God.
The World Health Organization says the international community must act quickly to control the spread of the new coronavirus. The global health body is warning the opportunity to stem the spread of the disease is shrinking.
Our situation is that we're still in a phase where containment is possible with a narrowing window of opportunity. And if there is anything move into another level, then we will announce it as soon as possible. We'll be the first to tell you that we're shifting into another level.
A WHO team of international experts and Chinese officials are visiting Wuhan today to assess the situation.
In Iran, the counting for parliamentary elections have started after voting ended last evening. Over 7,000 candidates are contesting 290 seats across 31 provinces. The Interior Ministry said it will start releasing results for smaller constituencies, while voter turnout will also be announced today. It said final results will be approved by the 12-member Guardian Council in early next week. The ministry added the approved results will be released about 2 weeks later. The parliament represents the country's 207 electoral districts. Some prominent pro-reform politicians and activists have called for the elections to be boycotted. A clerical body is responsible for appointing the supreme leader. Iran has criticized the Financial Action Task Force for placing the country on a blacklist. Foreign Office spokesman Abbas Mousavi called the step a politicized act, saying the stigma of financing terrorism has nothing to do with Tehran. The task force claimed the step was taken after Iran failed to comply with international anti-terrorism financing norms. Mousavi said, for over 2 years, Iran has followed regulations with regards to money laundering and terrorist financing. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met Oman's new leader Sultan Haytham bin Tariq in Muscat. Omani state media says Sultan Haytham discussed the close ties between Muscat and Washington with Pompeo. Pompeo is the first high-ranking U.S. official to meet the leader since he succeeded previous Sultan Qaboos. Oman has often acted as a mediator between Iran and its regional enemies. Before arriving in Oman, Pompeo met Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh and reassured him of the U.S. support. Before the Gulf, Pompeo visited Senegal, Angola, and Ethiopia on his first African tour. Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has warned Russia to stay out of U.S. elections. Sanders said intelligence agencies briefed him on Moscow's attempts to meddle in the ongoing election campaign. A leading U.S. publication said American officials informed Sanders and President Donald Trump of possible Russian interference. It reported Russia is engaging in disinformation and propaganda to boost the Sanders and Trump campaigns. Sanders told reporters in California, American people are against foreign interference in U.S. elections.
Let me tell Mr. Putin, the American people, whether you're Republicans, Democrats, Independents, are sick and tired of seeing Russia and other countries interfering in our elections. The intelligence community has been very clear about it. The intelligence community is telling us they are interfering in this campaign right now in 2020.
On Friday, Moscow denied meddling in the U.S. presidential campaign. Moving on, in Canada, Ontario's 4 major teaching unions have closed the province's public education system, leaving over 2 million school children out of classrooms. Representing nearly 200,000 teachers and education workers, unions are calling on the government to back down on cuts to education. Unions asked for a 2% wage increase, but the government capped public sector wage rises at 1% for 3 years. Elementary teachers said the future of full-day kindergarten funding for special education teachers and seniority hiring rules are their main concerns. The provincial education minister said Ontario teachers are the second highest paid in Canada. Teachers said they will not back down from their demands, having been without a contract since August 31st. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our news bulletin. In Chile, hundreds of anti-government protesters have clashed with security forces in the capital, Santiago. Demonstrations over public reforms have again flared up after becoming only sporadic in recent weeks. Young protesters equipped with gas masks and shields threw items at police who tried to break them up with water cannon. Chile has been rocked by protests since October, calling for better pensions, healthcare and education. President Sebastián Piñera agreed to a referendum on a new constitution in December last year. The two-day European Union summit to set the budget for the next 7 years has ended without agreement. The EU is attempting to close an $81 billion gap left by the UK's departure. The bloc faces challenges on the climate, migration and development. More in this report.
European leaders fell out over their next budget following tense talks to find a way of filling the Brexit-shaped hole. The summit exposed rifts between the rich and poorer states.
I'd even rather not talk about the details. The differences were just too big. We didn't make it, so we will have to continue to work. Anyway, there was no Franco-German proposal. After the many bilateral meetings overnight, there was a joint proposal of the EU President and the European Commission. This proposal was not even introduced in detail because it was clear that the main elements of the proposal wouldn't be sufficient to reach a compromise.
Denmark, Austria, Sweden and the Netherlands said spending should cap at 1% of joint GDP, but the beneficiaries of that spending asked for more than the previous proposal of 1.074%. Meanwhile, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said EU discord is a sign of democracy.
All of us working on the common priority that is the European Union and its budget for the next 7 years. And I think it is a good tradition in democracy to debate over the different views, the different emphasis or the different focuses that are put forward by the different member states.
The trillion-euro budget and its multi-annual financial framework will come into effect from next year and run to the end of 2027.
Turkish Muslims in Germany have called for stronger government action against far-right radicalism. They are mourning the victims of a gun attack on 2 shisha bars that claimed 9 lives. This report has more.
Germany's Muslims are in somber mood after the killing of 9 people in Hanau. Community members gathered at a local mosque to mourn an event being treated as an act of terrorism. Turkey's ambassador to Germany says at least 5 of the victims were Turkish nationals. Muslims say they are shocked and upset by the attacks.
We don't know how safe we are in Germany right now. So far, we have never seen anything like this in Hanau. It happened so suddenly. Everyone is very scared.
Muslim representatives held a news conference in Berlin. The chairman of the Central Council of Muslims, Ayman Maziak, put a question to the authorities.
The question that we are all asking is, especially the effective people of the Muslim faith in our land, what has to happen next in order for something like this not to happen?
In Berlin, more than 1,000 people took to the streets, showing their sadness, anger and solidarity with the victims of the attack. Across the country, concerns are mounting over the rising number of far-right crimes.
Soldiers from Niger and France have killed 120 terrorists in a joint military operation in southwest Niger. In a statement, the country's defense ministry said forces also seized bomb-making equipment and vehicles. The statement said the operation was carried out in the vast Elaboré region near the border with Mali and Burkina Faso. It said there were no losses among Nigerian or French troops. Niger's defense minister Issoufou Ketambe praised the French cooperation in the battle against terrorism. The region has been in a state of emergency for the past 2 years after militant attacks that killed hundreds of Nigerian soldiers. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has appointed ex-rebel leader Riek Machar as the country's first vice president. The decision comes on the heels of their earlier agreement to form a government of national unity. Machar's appointment was read on state television. Machar will be sworn into office today alongside 3 other vice presidents appointed to their roles yesterday. Kiir has dissolved the country's cabinet. On Thursday, the former rivals agreed to build a unity government before 22nd February deadline, paving the way for today's appointment. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni and his Rwandan counterpart Paul Kagame have signed an extradition treaty to ease their tensions. The agreement comes as the common border between the two countries remained closed for over a year. In the joint communique, the leaders said the treaty is a legal framework to handle alleged subversive activities of people in the different countries. The meeting was attended by Angola's President João Lourenço and Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi as facilitators. The treaty states that Uganda must verify allegations about hostile actions from its territory against the Rwandan government within a month. Rwanda closed its border in February last year, accusing Uganda of incarcerating its citizens. Uganda has denied the allegations and instead accused Rwanda of infiltrating its security circles. In Mexico, 8 people, including 2 women, have died in an accident in the northern state of Durango. Officials said a van crashed into a parked tractor trailer on the highway that connects the village of San Miguel de Curas and Coyotes. Rescue workers took 6 injured people to the hospitals in the city of El Salto in Durango's southwest. Officials said the victims were factory employees in El Salto. In Jordan, a small village has found a way to recycle trash it produces, and on top of the project is being run by successfully with the help of local women. The initiative is helping not only the climate of the village, but also making women self-sustaining through the sale of trash. More in this report.
Jordan generates 3 million tons of solid waste per year. But according to the United Nations Development Programme, the country recycles only 7% of its trash. The UNDP has initiated a program to clean the stingy environment of the village and to make the local women self-supporting. Since its launch, the project has repurposed over 100 tons of waste and making the local women self-reliant.
I like the project since it started the solid waste management idea. For us older women who were at home with nothing to do, this project was a good place to work. It improved our financial status and also gave us an opportunity to do something as opposed to sitting at home all day. Why shouldn't we work? So we are doing it, thank God, and all our neighbors are helping out. Our children and husbands also sort trash, and it is great.
After collection, the trash is taken to a warehouse for sorting and compressing. The women receive a cash incentive of around $300 a month from the UNDP. Residents and store owners have also started supporting the cause. Now, they want to help the women out as well.
Every morning we gather the boxes we no longer use. We put them on a shelf and prepare them so that the women pick them up. They helped us out a lot because we no longer have to pile up the trash in front of the store. They helped us out, and we are also happy that the women are benefiting.
The environmental impact is clear. Residents say the village is cleaner and safer for children to play.
I'm one of the residents of this area. I live nearby. Before this project, in the evenings when they would bring the trash here, the smell was unbearable. No one could go outside or sit indoors because of the smell coming out of this place. Over the past 2 years since this project started, a massive change happened. This has turned from a trash dump into a garden. There's no smell. Even the residents notice that there's no smell coming from here.
Authorities have also launched a national solid waste management training program in the country.
Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.